Today we are visiting the Maryborough Cemetery in central Victoria to find the grave of an English convict transported to Australia in 1840. His name was Daniel Backway. Daniel was born in Limehouse in London in November of 1824, and he was christened at St Anne's Church in Limehouse in 1830, on the same day as his three siblings. He was 6 years old. Sadly, 10 days later his mother passed away, and this suggests to me that his mother may have been ill for some time and wanted to see all of her children christened before she passed. 2 years later, in April 1832, Daniel's father, a waterman, also died. Now, a waterman was someone who transported passengers across and along the River Thames, so Daniel had grown up near the River Thames. Janet McCalman, author of the book Vandemonians, believes Daniel's father probably succumbed to the cholera pandemic that was raging in London at the time. So it was a very sad situation. Daniel and his three siblings, now orphans, were sent to the Limehouse workhouse, and Daniel was only 8 years old. The Limehouse workhouse was situated in Church Lane in Limehouse. Limehouse is now the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. According to the Historic UK website, Victorian workhouses were meant to provide work and shelter for the poor, but they became harsh prison-like institutions under the poor law system, known for their cruel conditions, child labour, long hours, malnutrition and neglect, and they became a stain on society, sparking opposition from figures like Charles Dickens. "Please, sir, I want some more." The famous Oliver Twist exposed the harsh realities of child life in Victorian workhouses. Through Oliver's struggles, Dickens highlighted the cruelty of forced labour, mistreatment and strict food regulations, providing a crucial social critique of the brutal system. Unfortunately for poor Daniel, the workhouse became his home and his life, and he soon found himself working as a chimney sweep. The Historic UK website states that the life of a chimney sweep, often referred to as a climbing boy, was an extremely harsh profession, likely one that would severely cut your life short. Those employed were often orphans or from impoverished backgrounds, sold into the job by their parents. With young boys employed to work in extremely dangerous conditions, some as young as 3, the practice was remarkably widespread and socially acceptable for quite some time. Children were used for chimney sweeping due to their size, obviously, which enabled them to fit into very narrow and enclosed spaces. With some as young as 4 or 5, perhaps not quite strong enough, 6 years of age was often the time considered most appropriate to enter the profession, so Daniel at 8 years old was the perfect age. Daniel remained in this profession until the age of 18. Now, while this might seem unusually old for a chimney sweep, he stood at 5'1". Years of working in London's chimneys had likely stunted his growth, leaving him smaller than many's age. So in November of 1840, he was tried at the Old Bailey, along with his mate William Randall, for stealing a pair of trousers belonging to outfitter Richard Hill. According to Police Constable Charles Wyke, at about 9:30 p.m, he saw both Daniel and William walking down the street and heard Daniel cry out, "Hey, Bill!" Daniel then handed William the trousers. Wyke said he grabbed hold of both boys. Now, I have a feeling he must have known them in previous run-ins. Just a little theory there. But Daniel got away. Wyke took William to the police station and then he went down to Rope Makers Fields. So Rope Makers Fields in London referred to an area in Limehouse in East London where rope making was a common industry. And that's where Wyke found Daniel. And Daniel's defence was, we were coming along, an Irish chap took the trousers. When he saw the policeman, he shied them into our hands. I shied them away and William took them. And William's defence was similar. He said that Daniel had met a chap he knew that had some beer and the man had given Daniel a pair of trousers and he'd given them to me and then the police took hold of me. So their defence was basically that an Irishman did it. So, I don't know, maybe he did, I don't know. But I do have some doubts about that. Both young men were found guilty and each transported for 7 years. Daniel did have one prior conviction for once deserting his master, for which he received 3 weeks imprisonment in Newgate Prison as punishment. His master was probably the adult chimney sweep who had owned him since childhood. Climbing boys, and sometimes girls, relied on the so-called master sweep for employment, clothing and food, and these young children were referred to as apprentices, learning the craft while the adult sweep had complete control over their lives. Very often these master sweeps were their legal guardians, meaning the children were tied to their master and their profession until adulthood with no route to escape. I do have one photo of Daniel in his later years, along with the family he went on to have, which is very exciting. However, the image is from a tree on Ancestry, and since it's not public, I don't believe it's ethical to publish it, so I won't be here. So I've asked my trusty Find My Convict Ancestor ChatGPT to create an image of Daniel as a young teenage chimney sweep, according to his convict description records, and then as an older man. Now, this older version of Daniel is quite similar to Daniel's real photo, I think. Although in real life, Daniel had less hair and was thinner than the AI has portrayed him. So Daniel was again put into Newgate Prison for a time before being put onto the Hulk Leviathan, moored at Portsmouth. He was then put onto the transportation ship the Tortoise. And the Tortoise didn't leave until September of 1841, so Daniel remained some time on the Hulk ship. Diane Oldman has written on her website, dedicated to the Redcoats who settled in Western Australia. She wrote that 400 male convicts were embarked onto the Tortoise from the hulks and jails in the London ports and Portsmouth, so obviously including Daniel. Of the 400 convicts boarded, 394 were landed in Hobart. 3 prisoners had died on the voyage. This was the first and only time the Tortoise was used as a convict transportation ship. Daniel's conduct was recorded as orderly when the Tortoise arrived in Van Diemen's Land in February of 1842. And he was sent to a probation station for 18 months. Convict men were placed in probation stations. The system involved dividing convicts into gangs and sending them to work in underdeveloped areas. Daniel was sent to Impression Bay. Now, Premedina, I'm not sure how you say that. Sorry, all you Tasmanian people who are probably shouting at me right now. Premedina was the most important outstation on the peninsula after Port Arthur. It opened in 1841. Initially growing vegetables, and by 1846 there were 445 convicts based at the station and 4 doctors were employed. A long tramway ran through the middle of the settlement to a jetty on Premedina Bay. And today Premedina is a small village situated on Impression Bay, and only a handful of the buildings remain, as you can see in this image. And I would suggest those bricks were probably made by convicts. So a trip to Premedina Bay would be a very worthwhile one for those of us interested in our convict history. About a month after arriving at the station, Daniel was reprimanded for being absent from work and he was found in the cookhouse, so he must have been hungry. A year later, Daniel was charged with misconduct in endeavouring to traffic with the military, and he received 10 days of solitary confinement for that misdemeanour. Perhaps he was trying to smuggle in some snacks. I've no doubt that Daniel was a man who knew the feeling of hunger all too well in his short life. Daniel remained at Impression Bay Station until 1844 when he received his ticket of leave, and I believe he was still at Impression Bay in 1847 when he received a freedom by servitude. Freed by servitude referred to convicts who had completed their assigned period of penal servitude. This meant they had served their sentence and were granted freedom. However, their status was different from those who were pardoned or emancipated. Convicts freed by servitude were often given a certificate of freedom which allowed them to work and live as free individuals, but they still faced certain restrictions and social stigmas. I believe Daniel found work on a farm somewhere near Hobart because in 1853 he married a young 17-year-old girl named Mary Ann Moxham, and his profession was recorded as farmer. He was 30 years old. Moxham was Mary Ann's stepfather's surname, the man her mother married in Hobart. Her mother was Margaret Stevens, and she'd been a convict transported to Van Diemen's Land for stealing a cake of soap in 1833. Although she did have prior arrests and prison time for larceny, which would explain the harsh sentence of life for stealing soap. Now, it's believed that Mary Ann's father died while Margaret was in Newgate Prison in London awaiting transportation. And Mary Ann was actually born at sea near Hobart, which means Margaret was pregnant when she was transported and during her transportation voyage. What a difficult time. Margaret's story is quite tragic and she is buried in Hobart, so her story will have to be one for the future. In March 1853, gold was found at Maryborough in Victoria, resulting in a rush. Known as Daly's Flat for a short time, Assistant Gold Commissioner James Daly named it Maryborough after his Irish birthplace. Daniel and Mary Ann made their way to Maryborough from Tasmania sometime after they were married, and they remained there, Daniel working as a miner for the rest of their lives. The couple went on to have 11 children. 3 grandchildren were Anzac soldiers, 2 were killed in action in Europe. They have many descendants living today, probably quite a number in Maryborough and the surrounds. Now, Daniel died of pneumonia at home on the 9th of May in 1882. What a remarkable life, and I would suggest it turned out to be a fortunate one in the end. Daniel, we remember you as one of the founding fathers of our nation and part of our extraordinary convict history.
103L. Yeah, they can't have a white baseball cap on. Not at the time. But they said they both say mid-20s, kind of light blonde hair, light brown hair. We had them on deck. Looked like